Hello, my name is Michaela, and as you can see, I am back in my room in Maine. I'm no longer at my dorm, so I came back home like June 4th or 6th or something like that. So I'm excited to rank all of my classes that I took during my second year at the University of Chicago. I did this last year as well, and I think it was fun not only for me to kind of reflect on my year and think about how I thought of each class that I took, but also I think it could be fun if you're thinking of taking any of these classes. Like if you're a student at the school, maybe it'll make you want to take a certain class, or maybe it'll dissuade you from taking a class. I did change some of the rankings from last year's video because, I don't know, I didn't really like the rankings I did last year. When I looked back at it and I was like, why did I do that? So the number one is still called Chef's Kiss. There's no words for it. It's just this one action of a chef's kiss that encompasses these top tier classes because they were so fantastic. Next is memorable in a good way, life-changing. I'll never forget taking this class. Third is noteworthy, remarkable in some ways. I feel like I should make a note of it, but it's nothing spectacular like the other two tiers are. After that is adequate. Adequate as in, it did the job. I took the class to learn that thing, and I learned that thing, and there's nothing really special about it beyond the fact that it fulfilled what I expected it to fulfill. And then lastly is memorable in a less good way, which means it probably had some negative aspects to it, whether dramatically bad or just sort of bad. And I'll definitely touch on that as I go over it. And also, by the way, I'm doing these rankings based on the class itself. I'm going to try to avoid talking about the professors as much as I can because, for one, I feel like that's not really my position in this video to talk about the professors. And then also because, there is a curriculum, so sometimes it's less the professor's fault if a class is good or bad, and more so just that's because that's the way it's taught. So, the professor obviously has a weight on whether or not the class is fun because professors have a huge impact on that. But I want to be focusing more on the course itself and what I learn and, the material in the class. So let's just start with autumn quarter then. I'm on my class planner thing right now because I don't remember the exact names of the classes that I took. Okay, autumn 2021. Fundamentals in Creative Writing, Creative Research, the Numinous Particulars. That is one class, but it's a mouthful of a title. I don't know why. Basically, it's a fundamentals in creative writing, which means it's a foundation course to understanding creative writing. And then it's creative research. So about finding the research that you need to incorporate facts and details into your writing. So especially if you're writing something that's set in a very scientific world or something that's historical fiction that needs to be accurate for the year that it's set in. Long story short, we learned about all these particulars on how to conduct research and how to incorporate it without it being too research heavy or too devoid of research. What's interesting is I was really looking forward to this class and it didn't impress me. There was a lot of reading, which obviously is a good thing for a creative writing class. You have to read literature if you want to do creative writing. But I was there was so little writing. And also because it was a fundamentals class, it meant we were also doing creative nonfiction and poetry and everything. And I want to stick to fiction, so for me, that just wasn't as much fun. I would have liked to have had more workshopping. We hardly did any workshopping. I kind of feel bad putting the first one into this category. I might put that one in memorable in a less good way. It might also be because I set my expectations so high for it that I was just disappointed. No, I'm gonna put it in adequate because it still did I still actually did learn a lot. I really did learn how to conduct research, how to use the library resources and everything. So it was definitely a useful class. Okay, it's going in adequate. Global Studies 1. This is the first of a 2-course introductory sequence you have to take in order to major in Global Studies, which I thought I was going to be majoring in. I took this class and I decided I didn't want to do the major. So if that kind of says something right here about the class. Now, this was very vague. If I had to describe it, it was a lot of theories and philosophical writing, to be honest. A lot of it had to do with critical race theory, politics, the environment. So it covered all of these topics, and to be honest, I thought it was too broad. I know that later in the major you do narrow down in on one of those, the environment or politics, government, law, border security. I don't even know. There's 4 different tracks to the major. But for me, doing this introductory sequence, I just felt so overwhelmed by it. I think they need to restructure the course. From what I heard, a lot of students felt the same way, that they try to throw too much at you and you just feel you've no idea what's going on whatsoever. I always felt a little bit lost in the readings. They were very difficult. And we had to do every single week, we had to write up a report with 9 other students in our group. That meant having a discussion with 9 of them, and then 2 students would write, and we'd flip-flop who does the writing each week, which was just a lot to deal with. It's hard to meet with a group that big, even though there's scheduled times to meet. I just didn't have very much fun at all in this. I feel it was hard to retain what I learned because it was so up in the air vague. I'm gonna put it in memorable in a less good way. I am sorry, Global Studies studies. But honestly, if this course made me not want to do the major, it can be nothing more than memorable in a less good way. Earth as a planet, exploring our place in the universe. I cannot say enough good things about this class. So going into this one, I was not looking forward to it because I've always said in high school and in college, I'm not a science person. I can't do science. I don't like science. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do for my phi-sci is physical science, by the way. So I was like, what am I going to do for my requirement? I landed on Earth as a planet, and it's basically like an introduction to astronomy course. And this is the course that made me think to myself, oh my gosh, I want to minor in this. At the time when I was taking the course, I thought I was going to be majoring in global studies and creative writing, so I thought there was no way I could fit in this minor. So I was kind of disappointed about that, but it was like something I wanted to do. But this was the course that made me first want to do that. So I'm going to put it in chef's kiss because that's how wonderful it was. It was a stellar course. Introduction to Russian Civilization 1. So this is part of the civilization sequence. You have to take 2 or 3 civilization courses depending on like what you end up allocating for your credits. I chose to do the 2-quarter sequence. Now, Russian civilization spans from like 1,000 years ago. I don't know exactly what the date was, like when we first started. We didn't have like an exam or anything, so we didn't have to memorize dates. So I'm really bad about the dates in this course, which I wish there was an exam because I wish I'd learned the dates better. Anyway, so the first course in the sequence we covered up until like just before the Bolshevik Revolution. I found this quarter to be interesting. It was a little bit focused more on the history, which I enjoyed, and we read a lot of just primary documents and historical texts. The structure of the class was relatively simple because we basically read a text and then we just talked about it all in class the next day. I don't know if all Civ courses are like that, but that's at least how Russian Civ went. I'm just gonna put it inadequate. I wouldn't call it noteworthy because there's nothing noteworthy about it, but I also feel like it wasn't bad in any way. Like I can't put my finger on what it was, so for that reason I'm just gonna place it inadequate. Not inadequate, but adequate. Okay, that's autumn quarter. Winter quarter. Urban geography. This class had a field trip in it, which was so much fun. I didn't think I'd enjoy the field trip because it was like morning till evening. It's a whole day thing, but basically we did a huge tour of Chicago, and I haven't been out into Chicago much, so it was really nice to get to actually see the city, and the professor just like, he knew everything about Chicago, so we were just like chilling on the bus the whole day, and he was talking to us about the city. That was great. As for the class itself, we didn't do any discussions at all. It was just sitting there like watching the slides and taking notes. I found it to be very interesting. I don't know what I'd ever use it for. I took this class because this is when I thought I was going to major in like environmental studies or something. I'm gonna put it in noteworthy because it was a very fun, like I always enjoyed going to it. I felt like it was just these very niche topics I was learning about, and it felt like it was worth my time, even though I don't know what on earth I'm going to use any of that information for now, except for like if I ever happen to use it in creative writing. I really had fun with it. So noteworthy. People, places, things. Victorian novels survey. This was a hard class. We read like 5 full Victorian novels in the span of 9 weeks, and that, if you've ever read a Victorian novel, you'll know that is a hefty load right there. The books ended up being very good. I mean, when you have a literature class that's good and you've got a good discussion going on in the classroom, it's so much fun because you pay so much more attention to details that you'd never even notice if you're reading it on your own. And I feel like I just gained a better appreciation for the style of Victorian authors and all the themes in them and the history that was going on at the time when these books were being published, because we read them in chronological order from like 1837 to 1901. We start with Jane Eyre, Hard Times, Lady Audley's Secret, Jude the Obscure. Anyway, I'm blanking on the last one, but I'm going to put this one in memorable in a good way because I think that I learned so much from it. I feel like I know better how to read a novel analytically. The only reason it's not chef's kiss is because I think that there was one too many books and it took away from our learning. Like we had to rush a little bit, which was a bit disappointing. Overall, it was a great class. Introduction to Russian Civilization 2. This one I liked less, and you'd think it would be more interesting because it's a lot of current events, so I was very appreciative of this class in that sense. Also, understanding the Bolshevik Revolution and Russia's role in World War I, World War II, the Cold War, all of that was also incredibly engaging. The only reason I didn't enjoy this is I felt like it was geared towards students that already have a good understanding of Russian history. So what I mean by that is we talked a lot about Russian culture and Russian literature and stuff with kind of the assumption that like I already know exactly what happened in Russian history. Now, I went into this with no knowledge of Russian history or society whatsoever. So for me, I was so lost in class because you've got these students who like some of them like grew up in Russia or at least in Eastern Europe and have a very good understanding of Russia already. So they're able to contribute wonderfully to the conversation. And I just kind of sat there feeling like an idiot a lot of the time because we're discussing culture that's in reference to history that I don't even know about. And our prefaces to history were just so quick and brief that I was like, oh my gosh, we're going 100 miles an hour. I don't think it was the class that was bad. I think I was ill-suited for the class. So I am going to say memorable memorable in a less good way because my experience with it wasn't good, but I don't think the class itself was bad. I think the class itself was very good. So this is my own bias that's putting it at the bottom tier. Galaxies. Okay, I have been going back and forth on what I want to put this in for a tier because the concepts itself were so interesting. We talked about like dark matter and black holes and cosmology and all these really exciting things. And this was the second astro course I took, and this is the one that I firmly decided, yes, I do want to do the minor. So you know what? I am going to put it in Chef's Kiss. The only reason I was considering doing memorable in the good way and not Chef's Kiss is because the labs were terrible. Like, they were not relevant to what we were learning about. They were stressful, and I felt like I learned nothing from the labs. So maybe I am going to put it in memorable in a good way. Also because I felt like the grades, the tests, the homework, they were graded in a disproportionate difficulty. Like, it just was stressful in that way. So memorable in a good way, because black holes and dark matter, like, those were my two favorite things we learned about. It was my favorite class to go and sit in on. Loved the lectures. Oh my gosh, okay, I'm already done winter. On to spring. All right. Advanced Fiction Workshop, Dangerous Historical Fiction. Okay, this class, even though the topic was technically dangerous historical fiction, and we did talk a lot about dangerous topics, so like incorporating subjects into your writing that people like to ban because they're uncomfortable with these topics, that was like, you know, the premise of the class, but really we just ended up writing whatever we wanted while trying to incorporate dangerous ideas, and it was so much fun because we workshopped every class. We also read a book each week. I've never done a class like this before where I really got to workshop other people's writing, and I got to enjoy the experience of having other people workshop my writing. So for me, I felt like I learned so much about creative writing. This was the Chef's Kiss class. It was a very chill atmosphere. I just felt so comfortable in that room. It was 3 hours once a week. I mean, it helped that I had a really good group to work with, and everyone was so encouraging and supportive. Yeah, it was definitely a lot better than my first experience with a creative writing class, and it made me feel better about doing this as a major. Literature and Rationality. I was looking forward to this one. Okay, we read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe, his short stories, Flatland, The Secret Agent. I don't want to just be listing books forever. So we basically talked about like what makes something rational in writing and what makes a story, like who kind of guides the narrator's rationality or a character's rationality. How do they justify their actions? And I just felt like the thread that we were following throughout the class, it just felt like we were just discussing motivation, and I didn't feel like it was anything special, if that makes sense. Like, we always talk about motivation anyway if we're discussing literature, so calling it rationality in a discussion of rationality just felt like putting a fancy label on something we already do. So I'm gonna put it in adequate. There's nothing bad about it, but there's nothing about it that like made me think that it was life-changing. Text and performance. So everyone for their art requirement at UChicago, well, not everyone, a lot of people try to get into a TAPS class, which is Theater and Performance Studies, because the drama classes are notoriously easy in both what you have to do for workload and also grading, which was very true. Well, the workload itself, actually, we had to write a couple essays, we had to put on several performances. The performances were really hard because we had to meet with like a group of 5. And let me tell you that trying to schedule a meeting with 5 people when there's not already a scheduled meeting time, between everyone's clubs and classes, there were a lot of seniors in the class too, which it was just really hard to schedule things. To, like, long story short, it was so hard to get everyone together to rehearse. I did feel like I learned a lot about theater and the texts that actually are then transformed into an art on the stage, and kind of what that transformation looks like of interpreting what's on the text. I'm just gonna put it in noteworthy because even though I had fun acting and stuff, also the texts that we had to read, I guess I'm not a fan of reading scripts. I kind of learned that. We had to read like Beckett and Brecht and see, you know, kind of examine the different ways that they interpret the theater. And it was alright. It was alright. Okay, one last class, exoplanets. So exoplanets was my 3rd astro class, and it was basically a look at how we're able to find different planets around other stars. There's a lot of different methods. And what was so fun about this is I really enjoyed the labs, because labs I've found in the previous astro course I took, galaxies, they weren't relevant at all. So going into exoplanets, I was kind of expecting the same thing, but these labs, I felt like I was an astrophysicist. It was the coolest thing. We were like looking at data and looking at images and using software, and obviously we were being like handheld through it. You know, we had the TA helping us in the lab, and we have like step-by-step instructions. So obviously like we weren't actually doing anything impressive, but it was just so much fun to experience doing that, and you know, to feel like I'm finding planets even though I'm not, and learning how to use all of these data tables of exoplanets. It was a very technical course though. There were less theories like the black holes and dark matter that I had really enjoyed back in Galaxies. I'm gonna put it in Chef's Kiss. The labs were just so great, and I felt like I there was not one single lecture I didn't enjoy. And I even had fun studying for it. So I'm gonna put it in Chef's Kiss. So that's it. Those were the 12 courses that I took. So I hope that this was kind of fun to watch. And I don't know, I really enjoy doing this because it helps me to just kind of remember what I think of each class. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a spectacular rest of your week.